consulting firm that provides sustainable solution and project management services to maximize your business growth. Our purpose is, our model is, our purpose is your solution. We are your back-end support. A lot of organizations, sometimes their staff, both in the operations and on the program level, are so busy doing their duties and doing their roles and responsibilities that they don't have time to either project manage or strategic plan the roadmap that is needed for successful organizational execution annually. And so that's where we step in. We provide you with these sustainable solutions based on researches of successful companies, as well as those companies that, learn from their errors and now are on a thriving level. And we compile it into strategic planning method in various areas so that you have the boundaries and the roadmap for success. We do that in a few ways. We have executive coaching, which is provided one-on-one or group or through group coaching. We have nonprofit management services, which is a whole gamut of everything from board development to grant writing, to program design for your program for any new starters. And we have organizational development to help with your internal structure and your work environment and your people culture, as well as strategic planning. Every organization should have a strategic plan. Whether you update it every 3 years, every 5 years, you should have a strategic plan. And we provide workshops to lead those sessions and develop the strategic planning report that you are able to implement. Okay, let's get into the meat of why we're here. Creating a dynamic funding methods to sustain your nonprofit. We're going to do our second poll. And I wanted to see how familiar are you with some nonprofit revenues. Are you familiar with any individual contributions, corporate philanthropy, fundraising events, government foundations? And I believe you're able to select multiple choices. You can place in the chats, or if none of the above, if your organization is just getting started in the fund development process, then you can select that as well, or you can place it in the chat. And this is just to see to how in depth this information that will be shared needs to be. Okay, great, awesome. So we have familiar with fundraising, that's good. Familiar with government and foundation grants, and most are familiar with individual contributions. Please note federated funding include the United Way, which I know everybody has heard of, but may not be as clear as to how that works. So with these selections, if when you do your post survey, you would like to learn more in-depth information of how these work, each of these streams will work individually because we won't have time to cover it all during this session. Please then flag that within the post survey, and we will definitely follow up and perhaps make it another webinar session to provide more in-depth content. All right, here we go. So, traditional funding methods. Nonprofits, when a nonprofit is starting, everyone thinks nonprofits, they think immediately, the first thing that comes to mind when, I'm going to ask if someone would unmute the phone, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of nonprofit revenue streams that people associate nonprofits with?
I changed everybody's ability to be able to unmute themselves, so feel free.
Okay.
My first thought is private donations.
Private donations. Okay. Great. That's good. Anything else? And who was that?
This is
Please.
Darlene.
Darlene, and you're right, private donations. For a lot of nonprofit organizations, that is the majority of their funding stream traditionally, that represents sometimes 60 to 68% of their funding budget. But it comes through a variety of ways. But private donations is definitely one of them. A lot of people also associate grants with nonprofits. They think, if I have a nonprofit, then I can get grants and qualify for grants, and how can I get grants? And while grants are a definite revenue streams, grants are never, for a long-standing nonprofit or sustainable nonprofits, grants are not the majority revenue stream for a nonprofit. Sometimes they range anywhere from 2 to maybe, at most I've seen was 14% of a nonprofit organization budget. But and so that's something to think about, especially for the starter or those who are starting out. So let's first start with individual contributions. Individual contributions, whether private contributions, are essentially those provided by individuals who will give based on their level of capacity to give, whether you are doing a fundraising event or a campaign, or you have a monthly giving set, they will give through that. Corporate philanthropy deals with any type of corporate sponsorships through local corporations that you may have in your community, or national corporations that provide what they call social responsibility funding that they set aside every year to donate to nonprofit. Please note that people sometimes negate, but churches are also considered a corporate entity that can be a tool for corporate philanthropy as well. Fundraising events, of course, everyone is familiar with that, where anyone will have throughout the year, whether it's golfing or a gala or bowling or something to that regard, they'll be able to participate in throughout the year. A lot of nonprofits usually have 2 to 4 events, 4 being the most, 2 being the minimum, and usually in average, I believe they have 3. A small, medium, and a large usually is a dinner or a gala or something like that. And government and foundational grants are, whether it's states, county or city government grant, or federal grants, and private or public foundational grants are heavily accessible. However, they do require a lot of time to develop those applications based on the level of award amount that you're requesting. And also, again, possibly should be maybe the first top 3, but definitely not the first go-to regarding trying to build your budget, because grants are awarded in cycles. And so if you apply for a grant in May, usually the time frame for an award receiving is 30 to 90 days. So if you're in need of immediate funding, that may push you off the way. And so therefore, you may need to build on your other 3 immediate, that can give you tangible revenue through individual contributions, corporate philanthropy, and fundraising events while you're waiting for the grant cycles. And please note that when you are a new startup, it's great to build your budget revenue with individual contributions first. So then when you're writing and requesting the grant application, you're able to put in your individual contributions as a supplement income to show that you're at least building on your revenue for your organization. These are the traditional methods of how nonprofits usually acquire their funding and sustain their funding throughout the year. However, times are changing, and across the country, individuals are trying to integrate another method of a different way of nonprofit thinking, in the fact of that you as a nonprofit would provide your mission work on the front stage, but yet think corporately. And so what we're going to dive into is how to kind of integrate a corporate aspect of a corporate aspect of funding, and how corporations get funding and integrate it within the nonprofit world for sustainability, because that is kind of like a new model that is a lot of nonprofits are taking and embarking on, because it's just proving for time, and it's just proving to be more sustainable. So let's go. All right, so we're about to embark on 11 ways to increase your nonprofit revenue. All right, so because we are an intimate group, we're going to have a little talk period. I just like to hear feedback. This first slide, the first way is to increase and retain donors. That's a given. The second way is to increase and retain current donors. The third way is transforming your board. And the fourth way, number 4, is creating or increasing membership. We all know that donors engagement and donor recruitment are hard. It's, within this day and time, it's essential on who you know, because people give to people with causes. And so a big part of that, though, that could help a development manager, whether you're a development manager or a director, or if that's just your responsibility on the board, is having a board that is really heavily involved in the fund development, not so much fundraising. That's different, versus a board being transformed to be heavily involved in the fund development aspects of a nonprofit. And so let's take a deeper dive into what that entails. Out of those 4 ways to help that we just shared, one of those 3 ways to really ensure you can get new donors coming on, or you can retain your current donors, is to have a great board of directors. And in order to do that, to create what we call a culture of philanthropy. A lot of times board of directors, they are, their thought process in their mind is, I sit on this board and I can say I'm a board member of so-and-so agency, and I sit on this board and this is what we do. But you kind of want to put them to work a little bit. Yes, they can be a governing board, but you can also somehow put them, I call it passive duties, that they are able to become involved in, to create a culture of philanthropy that starts at the top. Because of the fact that if you as an organization is trying to engage externally, your foundation needs to come from internally, and that starts with your board, who is essentially external volunteers. And so we all know that board of directors, board members are essentially agency ambassadors, but there are other ways that they're able to give as well. That there are other ways that they're able to create this culture of philanthropy to help you increase your donor engagement. As agency ambassadors, they are able to do it in so many different ways where they can create thank yous. We call it a thank you telethon, where they can create a thank you telethon one day where they reach out to a portion of your volunteers just by phone, where you sponsor food for them and they're just calling just to say thank you, as a way of showing appreciation and integrating a personal touch. Is just really, really a great strategy. You know, sometimes when you see on television, you see sometimes when a president calls a citizen, you know, they're just so honored that they're talking to somebody at the top. And that same strategy can be integrated and really can be systemized within a nonprofit organization, because you can't negate the fact of personal connection, because people give to people with the causes. So we know that nonprofit industry is $1 billion industry of charitable giving. So there's a lot of causes out there. But if you really make your relationship personable, if you really are tangible with your board of, using your board of directors to engage with your donors as a part of their role and responsibility, and not just through a letter, but through intentional outreach, then that is a huge way that you can really, you can retain your donorship that you have. Of course, attending public events and bringing a +1 is always a must. I sat on a board, and that was not a responsibility of a board, of the board. The executive director did not give them that ask to do, which I thought was a bit strange, because that should be a huge responsibility of a board member, to that any type of public event that the agency have that they represent, that board member, if there is nothing else on their schedule, should be there, and should also always, it should always be an ask that they duplicate themselves and bring another person, preferably someone that is not familiar with the organization. And so that would be a way to do an outreach and get them on board, so that whether they may be a future board member, or they could be a potential donor. And of course, annual gifting. One of the things that, you know, kind of shifts people away from wanting to sit on the board is their fear of having to give out of pocket. So one of the ways to be able to do that is that every board member should be tasked with the fact of providing an annual gift. It's up to those board members and how they should make that happen and accomplish that goal. They, as a board member, could collectively get together to say, we will conduct one fundraising event on behalf of the board member to bring in a total collection of what we are responsible to give on an annual basis. So let's say each board member is responsible for $2,500, and there's a board member of 4 or 5. So they would then collectively say, we will raise $12,000. We will raise that amount collectively to bring in, sorry, hold on. We would raise $12,500 collectively through this fundraising event. And that'll be our personal contribution. I think the drive of it is that the board of directors should not complete a term without providing some type of financial contribution to the annual organizational budget. It's their fiduciary responsibility. Yes, it's a volunteer position, but the part of being a board member is that you are providing a service, you're doing a give back to the community to which you are a part of. And this is a way to do it. So if they're not able to individually contribute, then it should be a strategy where they can cultivate a fundraising event that will collectively meet their individual needs, responsibility that they're supposed to contribute. And yes, everybody has to be on board, of course, to be able to make this happen. But all of these in those circles kind of help takes the weight off of the development manager as well as the CEO. I've seen multi-million-dollar organizations where the board is responsible, the board provides advice and helps possibly with policy and procedures and establishing those, but really have the balance is the scale is in balance when it comes to fund development. And that's not something that should be allowed under a nonprofit organization. They need to be responsible in providing these type of responsibilities as a part of their board term, and as a part of their board evaluation process at the end of the year. They need to be able to say that I've participated in all of these areas, and collectively together we have created a culture of philanthropy that starts at the top and is funneled throughout the organizations to help the CEO, to help the development director engage on the external for new donors, for new corporate sponsors, for new funder. So let's see. Okay, building a robust volunteer force is another strategy. Retaining productive development staff and increasing earned income. Well, you're saying then, well, we're nonprofit. How do we do that? How can we build a robust volunteer force? How can we retain productive development staff, and which can honestly lead to an increase of earned income? And earned income under nonprofits could be, if you're a mental health agency, you have counseling services under your mental health agency that individuals, they pay your fee for their counseling sessions. That's a part of earned income. And so one of the trends that I've seen is that a development team sometimes usually is one. I know I worked with an organization in Maryland. That person, she was a one-person team who did the development and the marketing and the communications and writing all the letters and the newsletters and everything, and was completely overwhelmed. And that is a trend for a lot of organizations where they have 1 to 2 individuals in their development team handling a multi-million-dollar budget, responsible for bringing in so much funds, whether it's through grant writing or facilitating donors or leading a fundraising events. And sometimes the development director act as a PR, public relations, because they're now sometimes having the responsibility of going to a donor event, donor sponsor event, to maintain that relationship and that partnership. And so a strategy that could be to help ease we're going to take a deep dive into one of these, and the one that I chose was this, and how to build a robust volunteer force, right? One of the things that, if you're a development manager, that whether you're a team of 1 or a team of 3, based on your budget ratio, you should be able to craft what your team, your ideal team would look like. And you don't have to worry about it being paid, because you can craft out an ideal team that is solely volunteer based on the resources you have in your community. All you need to do is just have to develop a strategy plan that you can submit to your immediate supervisor, whether it's your CEO, your COO, or your CFO. And then they, in turn, along with your board of directors fundraising chair, will look over it. And if they approve, now you have a whole staff under you, but it's not costing the organization at this time a whole lot of funding. And so what you have here is just for development team, and what subcommittees that you can create under a strategy that can be used for that development director and manager. One of it is creating subcommittees. And here, you're not bound to, but these are just some, whether it's grant writing committee, event planning committee, marketing committee, communications committee, public relations committee, and strategic partnership committee. And you're saying, well, that's all great, Maseta, but how can I get people to volunteer? Where do I get those volunteer from? Easy. One of your first means of getting these types of volunteers is simply through, one way is through the local colleges and university in your community, or sometimes even online, because now a lot of folks are virtual and remote. And so even with students who go online, who attend college online, they are still living within your community and still need an internship field placement site that they can work in. And a college and universities are a free resource that you don't necessarily need to connect with the career department in there. You need to connect with the actual academic department that you're looking to form a strategic partnership with. Like communications, a college has a communication degree, right? Marketing, same thing. They have a marketing department program in colleges as undergrad. Grant writing is the same thing. Journalism, public relations, the same thing with that. Public relations, or those who are looking for public affairs or marketing as well. You're able to look into a college or university program and kind of match the committee needs that you have with the college program that you have. And then your organization can reach out to that dean of that college or that dean of that academic program to see about becoming an internship field placement site for that nonprofit, so then that you're able to have seniors work at your nonprofit for an entire year on a project, and you put them to a project, and at least that can take the load off of what all of these expectations that a lot of development managers are expected to accomplish. And so colleges, again, college, whether it's community college or four-year college, is the way to go. And even with event planning, believe it or not, well, before COVID, high school had senior projects that some seniors needed some projects with. And so the event planning piece, you could recruit high school seniors that could help not strategically plan it, but they could help be the front line to help you execute what you are planning. So then that development director, now, instead of being in the weeds and doing all of these areas of roles and responsibilities, now they are the pilot and coordinating all of these areas and roles and responsibilities, because you now could at least staff these subcommittees with at least 3 people, I would say, in each of these areas to help you out. And I've seen it work. I've seen it work in with places even who they may have a volunteer, like here locally, we have a volunteer center that helps nonprofit staff areas of need. And they are just, you just have to tell them what roles what areas you need help with, as well as retired seniors who are in need of still wanting to work, but wanting to contribute somehow and have the time to do so. There are senior agencies, senior resource agencies that allow that seniors who are looking to do something would happily step in to help do something, as well as publicizing this in churches, local churches, because sometimes a church may not have funding, but they'll have the people. They'll be rich in people that you can then put in advertisement in their newsletter of the people and the volunteers that you'll need to fund to staff these subcommittees, that it can be a recurring thing for them, because a church, a local church group or a local women's club group can sponsor a committee. They can say, you know what, we'll take on the role of being the event planning committee for all of your fundraising events. That's what we'll do as our women's group. And we'll do that for the next 1 year, or we'll do that for the next 3 years. This is what we'll commit to doing. And now you have a staff, a team that your organization do not have to pay for. However, you have the extra hands on board to where you can allocate or assign different duties that is time consuming on your end, so that you can focus on the high level issues and responsibilities. So that's just a simple strategy in how to, how to increase your team within your development division without any cost to your nonprofit organization. And something your CEO, CFO may like, because they are seeing that you're thinking out the box and you're thinking of cost-saving ways for their organization. And in turn, as the revenue and budget and everything grows, they may look to fund that, as a full-time thing, but you gave them the benefit of time through volunteer services, because you crafted this strategy for them to consider and for you to implement. And so the next 3 funding methods, the final 4 rather, are implementing alternative funding source, researching program-related loans, creating for-profit subsidiaries, and investigating potential mergers. Implementing alternative funding source, we are going to talk about that in a deeper dive. But researching program-related loans it is pretty self-explanatory, and there are some out there. So it is an alternative to a grant. Like here, I'm based in North Carolina, and we have a finance agency that provides loans, but they're forgivable loans for affordable housing. So a nonprofit organization can obtain up to $500,000 of a forgivable loan, no charge to them, as long as they are maintaining the mission of that loan program, which is providing housing to a percentage of low wealth households. So there are program related loans like that out there. There's one I know with the FHL Bank in Atlanta as well, that nonprofits can tap into, that is mission driven, as long as they're providing the mission that they do not have to pay back. Creating for-profit subsidiaries. Basically, this is kind of what is also called social enterprises. And this is something that is heavily increasing in the fact of nonprofits are creating for-profit entities, business arms for sustainability. And it's completely legal, and you're able to do that. There are a tremendous amount of organizations across the country that, if you're housing organizations, they're establishing apartment complexes and charging rent. If another I know purchased, believe it or not, they purchased a hotel, and it's a hotel that that hotel service is being utilized to help undergo their program. Another one in California, they have 14 different businesses ranging that clients operate, but yet those businesses are fully, all 100% goes back into the program and client support. And even I know a church who placed a subway within their church fellowship hall as a means of providing, of generating funding for their nonprofit budget. So there are ways that you're able to be creative in developing for-profit companies under your nonprofit and still be legal, but yet still be sustainable, which is the ultimate goal. And investigating potential mergers is a huge, a new process that is taking place. And I will say that this method that I've seen are with projects, though, that's very scalable, meaning that they have to impact multiple communities based on the funder's requirement. And they're usually coming from large companies that want to merge or partner with a for-profit company, a nonprofit company, let's say a Chase Morgan, a Quicken Loan, or Ford. They want to partner with a nonprofit organization to provide a scalable solution within the communities that they serve. I've seen where nonprofit would receive $10 million from a, let's say, Quicken Loan, for them to provide services within the 4 designated communities that Quicken Loan's headquarters were in. And so that was a merger that they made in partnerships and services for, forgive me, there is a dog for the remaining, for at least a 3-year partnership agreement. And so we're going to take a deeper dive in alternative funding source where, and look at examples. Forbes has the 100, which is what I'm studying right now, the top 100 nonprofit organizations within the U.S. And right now, what I'm doing is I'm studying the various areas of what makes them the top and their revenue so sustainable as that. And one of the models that these are all located in the top that they all follow is, along with providing services, free services, they also provide alternative funding source. Goodwill Industry is a huge example. They first started out, of course, everyone knows they're all about career and job training. They first started out with having retail stores in the neighborhoods allocated to the people and individuals that they serve of low wealth income, so that it could be used as a place. It's a dual role of it's their community resource center, as well as it's also half of it is also serve as a retail store. Well, I think because they saw such the profit of what the retail store brought in every year, they decided to make that a separate entity in as an alternative funding source for them, as a separate line item in their budget, because retail stores have developed all over. They've placed them in every place in so many different areas. You see a Goodwill retail store that is kind of like a consignment shop now, that are in areas that are in well-to-do areas that you would see. I've seen some that has nowhere, no bus stop for any, so they're placing it in because they fact that people, they love to shop, and they've seen the revenue generated from having kind of a consignment shop retail store in upper class areas. Whether it's located in the shopping area, you can have a Harris Teeter, and then there's a Goodwill's store right next to it. And that's a mean of creating an alternative fund where you're taking it outside of the box of the community that you're served, and you're making it accessible to all public. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to generate funds for your programs, which is a perfect example with what happened with COVID. A lot of nonprofits received the Paycheck Protection Program from the CARES Act, but that only covered employee salaries. So then they also had to worry about, well, with the lack of being able to gather at large events, how do we fundraise to pay for our operational expense, our program expense? Well, Goodwill, because they had their retail stores, when they were able to open again, they opened in, of course, limited capacity of allowing people at a time, but they still had a means of revenue now that still generate for their organization to help their programs and operations. So that's kind of something to think about. As same thing with the YMCA, it's your typical gym membership. That's the bulk, a lot of the bulk of their revenue streams, by families and individual purchasing membership to this recreational facility, or summer camp membership for families for their children, along with the free services that they provide and free workshops and everything like that. They spend a large part of their marketing dollars on their membership, and they acquire donors to be able to provide scholarship for those who fall under a certain amount of income. And of course, we're all familiar with the Girl Scouts, which cookies, are their main source of revenue, cookie sales, in providing, in supporting the Girl Scout curriculum of leadership and personal development. And I mean, they are a prime model of the marketing investment that they implemented to brand cookie sales as the primary source of their funding. It's kind of like with McDonald's, how the golden arches are associated with McDonald's. We know that peppermint mint cookies or shortbread cookies are associated with the Girl Scouts because they invested so much marketing dollars for branding in that, and they've gotten a starfish of partnerships to be able to do that on their behalves. So those are some of the ways that you're able to implement 11 different strategies to help streamline and enhance your funding revenue on an annual basis, to hopefully reduce the bulk of the pressure of it being on solely that development manager, and focus on creating a team, whether it could be paid or volunteer around that person, and also integrating your board to help facilitate and take on a bulk of that responsibility as well, so that your program staff and your operational staff are fully supported in the resources that they need to help push forth the agency's mission. Okay, with that being said, we are going to just pause. If there are any questions at this time that anyone may have, I am open. You can unmute and please ask any questions that you feel free to ask any questions.
I have a question for you, Maseta.
Uh-huh.
In the world of grant funding, I know that it's kind of like a long, kind of drawn out, tedious way to get funding by filling out the application. And it's always a competitive thing. So you invest a lot of time and resources into actually applying for that grant. And with it being a competitive field, usually the likelihood of you getting it isn't always necessarily very high. How do you recommend utilizing grants, but making it a little bit easier for organizations to apply for those?
Right. Okay, that's a great question. The first thing that I would say is that, let's say if you're a new organization, the first thing you want to do to build up your grant recipient history, you should start with local grants. Um, you know, even if it's something small as from the Walmart Foundation Community Impact Grants that gives $5,000, or your local bank that may give $10,000. But because the thing is that locally, you have more of a success, a track record in achieving that, because if they're not familiar with your mission as of yet, they may be familiar with someone connected to your mission that could help kind of streamline you being just be a little, they can be a little bit more open. When I've scored grants in the past, you know, if I see a name and I'm familiar with the organization, I know that when I'm reading their application, then I can attest personally that, oh yes, this is true, because I know their organization. I've heard of their organization, and I know that what they're writing about, I can validate because I've had personal knowledge, or I know of someone that has mentioned it to me. So having, as a new startup, reaching out locally, kind of building it from the inside out, is kind of the way to go. Now, if you are going to going after larger organizations on the national level, or even on the statewide level, then the biggest thing that you have to be focused on is ensuring that your mission your application has a couple of components. For instance, we are facing Thursday. On this week, I had a call with someone. They were applying for a grant for $250,000. And I was editing that grant. And I had to give them some bad news. Because what I did, I call it matching. I did a matching process in that I created a chart and did what the foundation's requirements were. They had 3 high-level requirements and 7 subcomponents that they were looking for. And then then I mirrored it to the applicant's request for proposal, and tried to abstract their content to match what the funder was looking for, and it wasn't a whole lot. And because it was a disalignment, my recommendations to him was that, unfortunately, while it is a great grant, it's not a great grant for you, because right now your organization's status is not at the capacity that they need. They're looking to give $250,000 to organizations that can start now. If you're awarded in October, you will be able to start and show what your project is doing now. The request that they were submitting was to help develop the product that will be implemented within 20 months. And so that was such a disalignment that there was just no way you can be creative in crafting a narrative that will bridge the gap for a good match for that foundation. So if you are the applicant, you just have to be sure that your organization's status and capacity is a definite match to what the funder is requesting, because the funder is not going to change. It's not their responsibility to see your potential. Funders don't fund potential. They fund facts. They fund data. They fund impact. And if you are not at that status to provide impact for what they're requesting, then I would not go for that funding. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? And something else too, I want to add that, I've learned in the corporate world that nonprofits need to not be afraid um, to, to step into the waters. It's called sales, lead generation. You know, nonprofit, when you're in a for-profit corporation, you are actively going after sales. You are actively seeking, doing outreach. You are setting a target goal to say, I will reach out to 15 people, what have you, for the week. And out of those 15 people will generate a lead generation of 3 that will turn into a sales and a client. That's what corporate, high corporations do. Nonprofits should be the same way, in the fact regarding donor engagement or funding engagement. After you've crafted your funding calendar, whether it's your grants funding calendar or if it's your donor engagement database, and setting out that target number of how many will you go for outreach versus how many that you will not stop until you secure. And that's where the committees come in, and having a volunteer committee to help do some of that legwork. They can make the calls, or they can craft your database. They can craft your calendar for you, and then you step in and do the front line of making, completing the grant based on what has been identified, or making some of the calls. But you should always have kind of that sales associate mentality mixed with public engagement and relations of, this is what I'm going after, this is my target number, and I won't stop until I get it, and this is what I get what I've set out to get on a weekly basis. So lead generation is something that I'm looking to try to help nonprofits kind of integrate within their fund development strategy, so that they'll know that it's a viable source, and being able to reach through donors and individual patrons alike. And I'll say this, I know we're shortly out of time. One of the largest grant that I was a part of it took a team effort. It was $100 million with the MacArthur Foundation, $100 million that they give within a 6-year period to one organization. Of course, that organization, the solution that they are bringing to the table is a scalable solution that translate through various communities. And so, of course, the requirement is very, very competitive in what they'll be asking for. But when you are at that level, you must be able to show that throughout several years, you have been able to manage funding at different scales that produce great results. And right now, these are kind of like the scope of what high level nonprofit organizations are going after. They're saying, you know what, instead of trying to get 10 to 20 smaller grants that are 5,000 or 20,000, we're going to take that year to build up our grant history. And then within 2 or 3 years, we're going to go after large grants that will be have a renewal of a 3 years or 5 years, 7 year, 6-year process, so that we don't have to worry about it. And that's something, if you're looking for grants, you should have on your radar. And there's a lot of renewal grants out there. Renewal grants there are some public foundational renewal grants, definitely government renewal grants that provide 3 to 5 year renewals on an annual basis. So, okay. If there are no other questions, I just want to share that we have our September curriculum we will be starting coming up, where we will be joined by different thought leaders in each of these sessions every Thursday. And please note that these are not the final titles, but these are the topics that are very viable to nonprofit organizations that they should have regarding a strategic planning system, leadership development and training, and how you are able to do that virtually given the climate that we're in, as well as marketing and funding, of course, is the fourth topic. And Janelle, who is my wonderful co-host, has been here with me helping in the background. She leads the marketing strategy sessions where she shares different contents every third Thursday. So Janelle, you want to share a little bit about what the topic will be on September 17th?
Yeah, thank you. I plan on having the presentation kind of following how to map out your customer journey. And then when you have a plan figured out for your actual customer journey, how to integrate content at those different kind of path points to re-engage your audience continually. And you can do that for facilitating funding. You can do that for just general engagement and awareness. And it's all based on kind of long-term conversions, and then being able to recycle those conversions into ongoing, reoccurring, kind of revenue and conversions later on down the road.
Okay. Well, can't wait to hear from that. I know I'm learning from listening to your marketing sessions, very well sharpening areas for me in that. So we hope that you will join us. Invite colleague, a board member, management team, anyone to join us. You can listen in, you can or you can tune in via the Zoom link. So thank you for joining us. We are very glad that you took a little bit of time on this Thursday to join us. Please be sure to follow our website. We're going to update the website with the links for the September curriculum. You can follow us on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. And please feel free to do the survey after this session. So with that being said, I want to say thank you, and we wish you a good day.